Good to go. All right, we will go ahead and call our Board of Adjustment meeting to order and adopt our agenda and approve our minutes from last month.
I move to approve the minutes as submitted and the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. First order of business, CWMG LLC, 2025-15V. Neva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a variance request for relief from the Cook County Zoning Ordinance, Section 7.05, to replace and expand a principal structure at a reduced ordinary high water level shoreline setback of 59 feet from Gunflint Lake, where a minimum of 100 feet is required at 341 Mile Pine Road. The applicant's property includes 1.94 acres with approximately 295 feet of Gunflint Lake shoreline. The parcel is contained entirely within the LSR zone district. Newly created lots within the LSR zone must be 1 acre in size and 150 feet wide at the structure setback. As such, this is a conforming lot, and Gunflint Lake is classified as a recreational development lake. The variance application requests to replace the existing cabin with a new principal dwelling at the same shoreline setback of 59 feet from the shoreline of Gunflint Lake. The existing single-story cabin is 252 square feet according to county records, and the proposed replacement three-story dwelling totals 5,144 square feet. Design plans also indicate a proposed garage at a conforming building site. For ordinance citations, the Cook County Zoning Ordinance, Section 7.05, lot sizes and setback requirements, outlines the requirement for recreational development lakes to have a 100-foot building setback from the ordinary high water level of lakes. Residential non-conforming structures in shoreland area are granted certain rights under Minnesota State Statutes 394.36 to be allowed to exist and can be repaired and maintained, even replaced in its exact configuration without variances. However, there is no inherent right for expansion to these structures. In your packets on page 8, I included the state statute reference in which it does say that the grandfathered rights do not include expansion. Minnesota state statute is incorporated into the Cook County Zoning Ordinance under section 9.02, where it says the continuance of residential nonconforming structures. Also says that these types of structures may be continued, including through repair, replacement, restoration, maintenance, or improvement, but not including expansion. Expansion of a nonconformity includes any increase in height of the structure. For background, the applicant, CWMG LLC, purchased the property in July of 2024. The property currently has a driveway, cabin, dilapidated remnants of a shed, and an outhouse on the property. County records indicate that the cabin was built in 1963, predating the ordinance, but has an effective build date of 1985, indicating some maintenance over time. The property is accessed from Mile Pine Road, a narrow, privately maintained road that provides access to properties along the south shore of Gunflint Lake. Included a bunch of photos in your staff reports. So on the screen is the subject property noted further towards the end of Mile Pine Road. For site conditions and considerations, for the septic review, the variance application does not include details regarding the septic design or site-specific capability or compatibility information. The County Environmental Health Officer, Jesse Johnson, has provided the following review. Environmental Health will require an approved septic permit for the future septic system before any land use permits are approved due to the vague septic plans in the variance application. The property must also be in total conformance with Minnesota state and county septic rules. For impervious surface coverage, shoreland zoning limits impervious surface coverage to 25% maximum of the lot. At almost 2 acres in lot area, this lot can sustain a relatively large amount of development to be within that 25% impervious surface coverage allowance. The parcel will need to be covered by less than 21,000 square feet of impervious surface coverage to remain in compliance with shoreline standards. The proposed structure is under that amount, indicating that impervious surface coverage requirements will be met. For wetlands, wetlands are not an issue driving the need for the variance request. Since I wrote this report, our wetlands specialist, Mitch Travis, was able to do a site visit, and he did confirm that there are no wetlands present on this property that would limit development in other locations. For slope, the parcel does contain steep slopes, about 18%, which are considered are a consideration when evaluating practical difficulties related to the variance request. There is a bluff feature on the south side of Mile Pine Road, but not on the subject property in this building location. There's a bunch of slope transects that I took, kind of demonstrating some of those different variation, but staying fairly steady around 17–18% in that location. Structure placement is not prohibited on steep slopes, although the zoning ordinance does require additional best management practices during construction to control stormwater and erosion impacts. The application indicates a garage is planned to be placed at a conforming building site on the lot where the steep slopes are located. For shoreline health, the property has old-growth pines, some cedar trees, and a mix of younger deciduous and coniferous trees. Some tree removal is evident on site and would be necessary for construction of the proposed structure. New development or construction activities within root tree zones of retained trees often result in tree mortality and may occur from the construction of the new structure. The application indicates retention of trees is a reason for the need for the variance. For shoreline setback averaging, the Cook County Zoning Ordinance has a formula to review requests for shoreline setback relief with regard to existing development on abutting proposed on lots on either side of the proposed variance location. When I applied that formula to this location, it identified the parcels on one parcel on either side of the subject property that were within the target location. The parcel to the east, which was granted a variance previously, was about 35 feet from the shoreline, and the parcel to the west is about 90 feet from the shoreline. When I did the average of both of those, it came up, identified a 75-foot structure setback relief could be considered to kind of meet that, is more or less seen as like a benchmark, if you will. Let's see, so there's the kind of comparison of the shoreline setback averaging on your screen, and then the table that's in your packet identifies the size and proximity to the lake of those two structures. So the property to the west has about a 90-foot setback from the lake with about 1,000 square foot floor area structure. To the east is about 35 foot setback with about 1,500 square foot floor area. This variance was granted in 2017. The findings noted that new construction will occur further from the shoreline than existing or adjacent cabin. Practical difficulties and lack of reasonable use defined by deteriorating condition of the current structure were the findings of the board when I was reviewing that variance file. And then for the subject parcel, just as a reminder, it's a 59-foot setback and from the lake, and the current structure is about 252 square feet for floor area with an increase in the proposed ground floor area for the new structure. For public noticing, the application was legally noticed in the Cook County News Herald on September 12th. 10 letters of notification were sent to adjacent property owners as well as Cook County departments and the DNR hydrologist. 3 written comments were received from adjoining property owners during the written comment period. Frank CO and Cindy Imsdahl CO of 302 Mile Pine, opposed to the request, indicated that CWMG LLC was associated with the 2017 variance on the neighboring property, which allowed an expansion in the form of a tear-down rebuild, does not want to see this pattern continued, and wants the 100-foot setback to apply equally. Greg Gekas from Heston's Lodge at 579 South Gunflint Lake, opposed to the request. Experience recreating on Gunflint Lake shows many cabins are not visible from the lake. Notes that the 100-foot structure setback and shoreline vegetation are key parts of that. Has noticed over recent years that there have been prominent second homes being built with landscaping visible from the lake. Feels that the tear-down rebuild as proposed would disrespect the aesthetic and does not want variance approval unless a true hardship is demonstrated. And the third comment from Scott and Diane Hatfield at 304 Mile Pine does not have an objection to the proposed setback of the residence requested in the variance. Technical comment letters were also received from Cook County Soil and Water Conservation District. The SWCD provided a technical memo noting that Gunflint Lake is located in the Rainy River headwaters, and the water quality of Gunflint Lake is noted in good condition. Notes that land use practices can impact water quality by carrying more stormwater runoff into the lake when development is closer to the lake, and provided best management practices to consider. And the DNR area hydrologist provided a technical memo outlining their review of the variance request relative to the practical difficulty standards. The DNR recommended denial of the variance based off of several reasons. They identified that there were no unique circumstances associated with the property. They felt the request was not reasonable. They said that the criteria is about what reasonable given the purpose of the ordinance, not what's reasonable to the property owner, and the variance request should only be the minimum necessary to achieve the purpose of the ordinance. Let's see, number 3, the variance will alter the essential character of the locality. They spoke about essential character being the resulting structure, improvement in land water disturbance will alter hydrology, nutrient flow into water, soil stability, vegetation habitat, shoreline character, or be out of scale with the capacity of the land and water resource to tolerate the impact. The variance will increase the amount of impervious surface close to the shore, and increasing impervious surface and subsequently decreasing vegetation also eliminates the natural infiltration and treatment of runoff from the property. And number 4, the DNR requests the board to consider the expansion size, septic regulations, and stormwater control measures. And ultimately, the DNR found the primary reason for the variance is a design preference, which isn't a practical difficulty, and approval wouldn't be fitting those standards. For staff consideration for findings and fact, as we're aware, we're supposed to review variances based off of criteria outlined in state regulations. So those questions are as follows. The variance is consistent with the goals and policies of the Comprehensive Land Use Guide Plan and in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance and other Cook County official controls. I cited the shoreline setback requirement of 100 feet for recreational development lakes are our standard setback. The current cabin is 59 feet from shoreline. The replacement cabin is proposed to meet the same setback. However, it does not meet the same size of the current cabin and is a significant increase in size within the setback area. A setback of 75 feet may be considered per the shoreline setback averaging calculation. For Cook County Zoning Ordinance Section 9.02, which is the substandard grandfathered in structure allowances, does not permit expansion onto nonconforming residential structures. Cook County Land Use Guide Plan outlines a vision of the future in Chapter 4 for Cook County 2035, where inland lakes and forests include water quality of lakes and streams is outstanding and being sustained through citizen and agency monitoring, upgrading of septic systems, and enforcement of shoreline zoning regulations. Number 4, Cook County Land Use Guide Plan, Natural Features and Environmental Concerns Goal to maintain and enhance quality of natural resources and native ecosystems within the county. I provided several different types of policy recommendations. Number 22 says evaluate cumulative effects of land use decisions on watershed and ecoregion scales, include riparian ecosystem function and the permanent conversion of land. And number 17, consider visual impact of landscape alteration and new development. And the Land Use Guide Plan administrative and intergovernmental goal to integrate land use concerns into all appropriate ongoing administrative actions with policy number 77. Land use related decisions shall recognize the need to duly consider the rights and responsibilities of the general public good with the corresponding rights and responsibilities of the individual. Variance question number 2, proposed use of the property is allowed in the land use district in which the property is located. Proposed finding, the parcel is located lakeshore residential. The subject property is conforming to the zone district and lake classification with 1.94 acres with approximately 295 feet of Gunflint Lake shoreline. Residential uses are permitted in this zone district. Question number 3, the property owner is proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted in the zoning ordinance. Sorry, my slides got a little goofed up here. That's the next question. But residential use is a permitted use in the Lakeshore Residential Zone District. However, the proposed replacement cabin represents a substantial expansion in both ground floor area and height compared to the existing nonconforming structure. Expansions of nonconforming structures are not a right, and the proposed replacement does not reflect the size and scope of the original cabin. The application also lacks sufficient technical details, including stormwater management, septic design, and a full dimensional drawing to evaluate potential impacts. Granting this variance would provide a significant amount of relief when alternative building space exists on the parcel, and the proposed structure would be more visible from the lake than the current cabin. Next question, the property owner has established the practical difficulty involved is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the property owner. The applicant identifies in the original 1960s building site as the practical difficulty, noting that the relocating the dwelling would require removal of significant trees and alteration of the natural landscape. The property also contains steep slopes, which require additional design and construction attention, but do not on their own establish a practical difficulty. The application shows a garage proposed to be placed on the steep slopes, indicating that a more modest-sized cabin could alternatively be built at a conforming building site and retain desired trees. The Minnesota DNR finds that the facts do not demonstrate a valid practical difficulty and that the variance request is driven primarily by landowner design preference. Staff concur with this assessment. The proposed variance is sought to expand an existing nonconforming structure. However, practical difficulties cannot be created by the landowner and cannot rest on design preference alone. While the presence of mature pines is a unique feature of the site, preservation could be achieved through alternative building designs. As a reminder, the Cook County Zoning Ordinance stipulates that it shall be the burden of the applicant to demonstrate sufficient practical difficulties sustaining the need for the variance, and absent that showing, the Board of Adjustment shall not approve any variance. Next question, approving the variance maintain the essential character of the locality. The proposed structure does not fit the character of the current cabin on this parcel, but may resemble the cabin on the neighboring property that was granted a variance in 2017. Due to the close proximity of this structure to the lake, and the expansion of the second story, this addition will be more visible to lake users as compared to the current cabin. And the last one, the property owner has established that the practical difficulty includes more than economic considerations alone. Economic considerations are not the reason for the variance request. Staff recommendations for consideration. Based on the information provided in the application, ordinance requirements, and public comments, staff cannot identify a valid practical difficulty that would necessitate the variance. The request appears primarily driven by design preference rather than circumstances unique to the property. The scale of the proposed structure relative to the existing cabin and the size of the lot represents a significant expansion of a nonconformity. If preserving mature growth trees is a priority, staff believe a modified cabin design could better fit the property while reducing impacts to the shoreline setback and overall visibility from the lake. Staff concur with the DNR that the facts do not support a sufficient practical difficulty to justify granting a variance. While existing nonconforming structures may be maintained and improved, expansion beyond their current footprint is not a right. The proposed increase in building size, height, and impervious surface would remove additional trees within the shoreline setback and increase visibility from the lake with potential stormwater impacts in the absence of a functional shoreline buffer. These impacts are contrary to the goals and policy of the Cook County Land Use Guide Plan and the intent of the Cook County Zoning Ordinance. If the board determines that the request is reasonable and that there is a practical difficulty present and can identify findings to support the variance, staff recommend the board carefully consider the Minnesota DNR's suggested conditions, which include requiring a valid septic system, certificate of compliance prior to construction, requiring gutters and stormwater management measures to redirect and filter runoff, adding native plantings to restore and enhance the shoreline buffer, and prohibiting additional structures within the ordinary high water level.
Thank you, Neva. At this point, the applicant or the representative, would you like to come forward and state your name and address for the record and add anything you'd like to the narrative?
Thanks. My name is Graham Gillette. I'm 635 Harwood Drive in Des Moines, Iowa, and owner of this property, 341. And I was a little nervous coming up here because the previous hearing you had, Dustin, Clay, and Stanley made no comments. And as a communicator, I came with written comments, so I'm nervous that I'm already messing myself up. And then Commissioner Sullivan brings tissues up here, which makes me think you're going to make me cry. So I'm a little nervous. So we'll get started. But again, my name's Graham Gillette, and I appreciate your time. Our family formed CWMG LLC, which incidentally CWMG are the initials of my children. The purpose of the LLC was to, there's really no tax benefit for us or really legal benefit. The whole purpose of the LLC is to kind of formalize family decisions to alleviate fights down the road. So we'll see how that works, but that explains CWMG. But My wife and I are longtime members of public boards, as you are. I chaired the Des Moines Waterworks Board. I served on our local school board. My wife, incidentally, sits on the Des Moines Planning and Zoning Commission, so we understand the responsibility and time that comes with your role and appreciate your service. Our family has been part of Gunflint Lake for generations. Katie's grandfather purchased property here in the 1960s, and my own connection has grown through years of serving on the board of the Gunflint Lake Properties Owners Association. That explains our adjacent properties are owned by our extended family. We purchased the cabin at 341 Mile of Pine, which, as Neva explained, the original structure was built in the 60s to our best knowledge. It is a one-room, uninsulated structure with no electricity, water, and no compliant septic system. It is simply no longer suitable for use and must be replaced with a safe, code-compliant residence that blends into the natural environment. So as I go through this, I mean, the way that working with our architect and our builder and working through this ourselves, there are really some considerations that we tried to deal with, and that is that elevation gain that comes on that property, maintaining the forest around it with minimum disturbance. The sight line from the lake, I think, is very important to our neighbors and people that use the lake, so that we don't have a structure that dominates the shoreline. And that system compliance issue, the septic and the runoff, which I'll explain in a minute. But as Neva explained, the existing cabin sits at 59 feet from the lake. The plan that's before you today moves it slightly further back with an average of 66 feet. One corner touches 59 feet. In discussing this with the experts who have been helping us, relocating the cabin to 75 or 100 feet would require removal of mature pines and cedars, exactly the natural features that give the site its character. Preserving those trees is both an ecological and aesthetic priority for us. The elevation is a little tricky too, and really has more to do with the sight line from the lake than a lot of things. You know, the further we go back, that bottom floor, with you, if you will, is a basement, is a storage level basement. But if you move back in that elevation, what you'll see from the lake is more of a rock retaining wall, as opposed to it would be a little lower with that first floor being closer to the ground. So that elevation was a little tricky for us, and that's what we're working with. 2 years ago, and some of you may have visited the site and noticed this, a significant white pine very near the existing cabin was struck by lightning. That charged trunk still sits on the ground. When the existing cabin is removed, the combination of the removal of the felled pine, the storage shed, which has recently been demolished, the wood shed, which has recently been demolished, and the yet to be demolished existing cabin structure would create a fairly large open gap visible from the water. If the new building were placed further back, it would not, that open gap would have to be dealt with and may not preserve the wooded field that's there today, leaving that barren opening. Also, if you look at that drawing, there are two, if you move the proposed site back a little bit, if you move it back to that 75 feet, there's one significant cedar that might have to come down, which is understandable. Our concern is that if you're even in that 75, but definitely when you move back to that 100, there's a very significant white pine that I don't have the figure in front of me. I think it's a 38-inch or a 40-inch diameter pine, significant height. That we would lose that pine too. So that's one of the reasons why we're moving that back there. Considering this, and really after listening to our neighbors' concerns, a couple of which were on your slides today who wrote, we've talked to them since and before, we really started to think about our design choices to reduce that visibility from the lake. I brought a sample here just to kind of show you something. This is a proposed siding sample that we're working for, which is a dark black color. And the purpose of that, yeah, I think it's pretty, but the hope is with a black siding like that and a coordinating roof material, that will help it fade into the forest more than a light wood or a painted structure. We also, as you saw in the design, we purposely designed a wraparound porch with a lower roof line to hopefully soften that transition between structure to woods and kind of help it blend a little bit easier. We have heard, and we're thinking about it beforehand, but the staff report has reminded us, and we agree that working wherever this final cabin gets sited, working with experts, DNR, county, and others to plant native vegetation to replace and enhance the shoreline is important, and we're committed to doing that. We share the concerns of the DNR and the county staff about protecting water quality. We are committed to installing a septic system that not only meets but exceeds current standards. We've proposed on that site plan you've seen a potential location of that, but obviously we'll work with the experts to determine if that's the best placement for such a system. We're also committed to a gutter and stormwater system that will capture and filter runoff away from the lake. We think that's possible in this site, even if it's a little slightly further back. These are not afterthoughts. They are all central to our plan. Our lot is nearly 2 acres, and the proposed structure is well below the 25% impervious surface limit required by ordinance. We know some of our neighbors have expressed concern about precedent. Our intent is not to set a pattern of larger cabins to the shoreline, but to demonstrate how replacement can be done responsibly, blending in and protecting the lake. And that blending in and protecting of the lake is really top of our list. This variance does not alter the essential character of Mile of Pine. The new cabin will remain a seasonal recreational home, screened by vegetation, positioned further back than some nearby structures, and designed to blend into its forested setting. Our request is not about economics, it's about stewardship. By replacing an outdated and inadequate building with a sustainable structure that respects the shoreline, protects the lake, preserves what makes Gunflint so special. We believe this approach aligns with the purpose of the county's zoning ordinance, protecting water quality, natural character, and the rights of the community as a whole. And just to recap, I mean, as we worked with our architect and builder and others, we thought about the elevation, we thought about the trees, we thought about the sight line, and we continue to evaluate, and we'll have the right experts come back to you with those code compliant systems, both the septic and the wastewater. For these reasons, we respectfully ask for board approval to approve the request, and I sincerely appreciate your time. And I'm sorry I talked so long, but I took up all the other guys' time. Thank you.
Does anyone from the public wish to speak on this application? Hearing none, we'll close it to the public and discuss as a board and may have questions.
Thank you.
So I did a site visit yesterday, walking through the property, went down to the lakeside, looked back up. Actually went over and looked at your fire suppression system too.
It needs a little work.
Yeah. I just haven't seen one that close up before, so I was curious.
But they're great systems.
Yeah. And so I looked at the layout of the property, considered staff recommendations, particularly the DNR's conditions, and I just generally find as I look at this that the staff's proposal of looking at averaging and moving it back that additional 16 feet makes more sense to me than accepting at the 59-foot mark. There's just I could see some of the things in there that you were considering. I don't recall us ever having been. We do worry about vegetation, but not retaining specific trees is a means of thought process here. So that's generally where I'm at, having been on site.
Can I ask a clarifying question of Neva on page 9, the site sketch? The setback on that site sketch is the standard 100-foot setback?
That line, I believe.
Yeah, this,
Yep, so this is from the applicant's design. So the 100-foot structure setback is kind of bisecting
Right.
towards the back.
okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the standard setback.
Yes, yep.
Jeff, you made a site visit too. Did you?
Yeah, I was on
Curious
site.
to hear.
Walked around, probably showed up on the game cameras a number of different ways, but,
There's been no bear this fall, so.
Okay.
Fine.
after walking the site and then reading the packet and reading staff stuff, I have some real concerns about this. One of my issues is that it seems possible that this could be placed within setback polygon, I'd call it, with the side setback, the lake setback and so on. And it would also shorten the driveway, reduce impacts. And I do laud the desire to preserve large trees, but putting a driveway and a garage inside the critical root zones of some very large white pines really isn't a preservation approach. Those trees are fairly susceptible to root compaction and disturbance by construction, and you may very well lose them in 10 years due to the impacts versus moving this entire setup off to the side and literally avoid them. I was quite struck by the DNR's comments. I don't disagree with any of them. I think they raised some very valid points. And I would be much more comfortable with this if it was within the setback polygon and met the requirements of the lakeshore setbacks,
100 feet.
the 100 feet. I mean, I could
I'm just for
support,
clarification.
yeah,
make
I
sure
could
I understand
support
what
the
you're saying.
75 averaging, but to move it back and get it away from the lake and reduce the impact upon the mature trees would be really nice if they could do that. Given this is a very steep site, this is gonna be, it's gonna be a messy construction project. There's, it's not gonna be a site you can just drop the house in between a bunch of trees and walk away. It's gonna be very, very complicated, so, I would tend to agree with staff and with DNR. It just doesn't seem like a reasonable request at this point.
I agree with the staff facts and findings. I'm all for variations with setbacks, but I do feel that this is very, very close. And there's plenty of room to move that around to even get to a 75-foot and still get the design and layout and the lake view. So I would support the staff findings that the 59-foot setback is not a good idea.
I didn't have the benefit of making the site visit, so I definitely wanted to hear both of yours. But on paper, that's the conclusion I came to as well, looking at, that's why I wanted to clarify that polygon. Yeah, it looks to me like there's clear space on the right side, just thinking about the practical difficulty of the site. And I also, in considering the Minnesota statute, I think, we're not talking about a replacement in really any way. So that's sort of a non-starter in terms of replacing the cabin in my mind. And I would generally agree with the DNR's assessment as well. I also take into consideration that the setback averaging is happening bearing in mind a structure that was approved through a variance by the same owner, and while it's not specifically a consideration like we normally make where you can't create the practical difficulty, I think I do want to bear in mind that the setback average is taking into consideration actions taken by the applicant.
It's our family, but we're related to them. So
Yeah, yeah.
your point is still well taken.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
don't own it, but our family does.
I guess my point
wife
being
does.
that, you know, I wasn't sitting on the board in 2017, but I would have questions about that setback as well.
I don't disagree.
I
I
actually
just pointed
pulled
it out.
that variance, asked Neva to provide me that variance, and she did, and I read through it, and it probably would have gotten a fair bit more challenge from me than apparently happened in 2017. I was a bit surprised at what they came up with, but I did not go over and walk that property, so there might be some things that there are certainly things that they knew about that I don't. So, we'll just leave it at that. I did take time to read it, though, just because it is, on the averaging impact, it's huge, right? That you've got one that's 35 feet from the lake.
Yeah, that's very
That
close.
skews the average.
Yeah.
So I would come down with Jeff and say I would be more comfortable with the 100-foot setback, as it's stated, given that I don't see a practical difficulty to do otherwise, in my mind.
I guess my opinion and what I would state is, generally, when we're looking at practical difficulty, it would be pertaining to the topography, some reason, and I don't think we're seeing that in this site. So that, with that, I guess.
Could I just make one response? to
Yes.
that? And that is, and I probably shouldn't say this, I've never done anything like this before, right? I mean, I am, having sat on public boards, I appreciate and can understand your rationale to do all of this, and you know a lot more about these things than I do, and so I probably shouldn't start with that. But working with people who have been involved with this, our architect and our builder and others, is how we got here today. I don't have, to me, whether it sits at 59 feet, 66, 75 feet, or 100 feet, those are all numbers to me. That doesn't, it's not like I'm fighting for something because I have some strong opinion on it. What I had been told was there would be some, like I say, that elevation gain. You might see more of a retaining wall from the lake as you move back because of the elevation gain. So there's, you know, there's a sight line preference for keeping it within that maybe 75-foot range. The two trees that are impacted there, and I think Mr. Lee is right, you know, I have real concerns about building close to, especially that significant white pine, because I think you're likely to do some damage with that. And so I get that. And so that's why we came here today thinking, well, maybe this is a way to do that. But again, I leave that obviously to this board. And what I'm told is in that if we move back to that 75 feet, which I think is more than reasonable, you lose one cedar. Moving it back and maybe even repositioning to that 100 feet, we'll have to give some thought about, you know, what pine we can save or what, you know, or what we can't. Yeah. The other thing I'll just say, no, I guess it doesn't really matter. We put the garage on the site because we wanted to be transparent about what our hopes and dreams are, right? I don't think we're going to build the garage initially. At some point, we would like to do that. But I also want to say that regardless of where the house gets structured and if and where the final garage is, we have no intention to have any building closer to the lake than what the house is, because we do feel strongly that the structure next door sits far too aggressively on the site than we would build today, than I think is appropriate. That cabin is more visible on the lake than I think most anything else, and so that's why we won't be started with our idea of our design. Our whole hope is that we build something that disappears into the shoreline, and so it makes me sound like I'm being defensive. That's why I came here today, but I can understand all of the points you make about you know, positioning it, and I agree with the stormwater runoff and all of those things, and we will be good neighbors regardless of what the decision is here today.
And I know I can speak for them, but we appreciate your comments. I think what we're really seeing is we're not seeing tangible evidence to what the architect or the professionals you're talking to are telling you. If I believe you can come back with another application if you so chose with details of, well, this percent slope on a driveway is unsafe, or going to create this much more erosion, or some of that type of detail would give us something more to consider. But with the ordinance we have, it really kind of dictates. what
Defeating
we-
my own case for today, to be honest with you, but the difficulties are the removal of those trees. We do have that existing drive, which is a nice benefit to have an
Yep.
existing drive that we can build into. But the real driving force from a personal standpoint, my wife and I, was developing a design that disappeared more into the forest. And that's why we kind of were talked into this concept does that better. If you tell us 75 feet, if you tell us 80 feet, you tell us 100 feet, we're still going to try to make it disappear into the surface. You're the experts on how many feet it needs to be back. So I'll stop talking.
Thank you. Any more discussion or entertain a motion?
Do we have to accept the application as submitted, or do we say, you know, on condition that it's changed to a 75-foot setback, it can be approved as a condition? Or is it this is their request, which we respect when people come in and tell us what they would like to do with their properties. They have, you know, it's their property, it's the things they want to do, it's their dreams. We're not trying to rain on somebody's parade here, but we also have the constraints of the law about practical difficulty. And as we can see, most everybody that's been around through this discussion is not seeing it. So is that within our purview?
I would just say that I would amend my,
Excuse
if
me.
it was possible even to amend it, I could amend it to whatever you wanted to, if that made it
Okay.
easier.
Neva, for Tim.
Yeah.
You want to take?
Oh, were you gonna, I was waiting to.
No, I don't want to
Mr.
step on your
Nelson's here.
toes.
No, I wouldn't be stepping on my toes, it'd be educational.
Oh, sure. We'll let Tim take this. He doesn't have many meetings left.
The board can approve in part or in whole. So it's not amending the application. If you were to, and I believe the suggestion was to not necessarily go the 59, but 77 or whatever distance in there, it would be approving no closer than, anything be, that's further back than the 59 feet. That's not amending the application, that would be making your own decision based on that. And then they would have to work with whatever the decision was going to be. So you could make it 59, 77, 80, 100. And 100 would basically be just denying the variance altogether.
Yeah, because then it would be building within a compliant
Yeah.
footprint.
So my question then is, if we are, say, 75 feet, do we still need to show a practical difficulty in 75 feet? Because even then, there's no practical difficulty at 75 feet.
Shoreline, and I'll ask staff, shoreline averaging is a permitted method of establishing setback?
I think we've seen that as a reasonableness element, you know, kind of looking at the different criteria, and Director Nelson can weigh in too. I've always viewed the shoreline setback averaging as kind of reasonable, how close, how much of the request is okay. But I have never seen that as just kind of a blank check for practical difficulty, but it's a good question.
No, it is a tool that's allowed by the DNR, and basically, yes, we have used that as just one of the tools in the toolbox to evaluate from, whereas some counties go and expressly state that if you can meet the shoreline setback averaging, you can use that as a specific practical difficulty. Our ordinance does not say that.
Okay, so it does not say that.
That is correct.
So we'd either be approving this or denying it, because then the acceptable limit, because I don't know that we can say even at 75 feet that we're talking about practical difficulty.
Correct.
And that 75 feet is only due to that other one that's at 35.
Then it's
Correct.
kind of skewed
Yeah, in
to
terms
do
of how
that,
it's
yeah.
arrived at.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a weighting factor there, but I think from just I think we're agreed that there's not a practical difficulty.
Correct.
I think
Okay.
yeah.
As a result, I don't see how we can approve the request as
Correct.
it's submitted with, and just encourage you to
Correct.
reconsider
Yeah.
for a compliant 100-foot setback.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be much more comfortable seeing a
New
a
application.
denial and a new application that lays out how this all fits together in an attempt to meet that setback polygon, so to speak.
And if we were to go there, I'd also encourage that some of the elements that staff pointed out that we didn't receive, like the septic plan and spacing and policing and all that other stuff be included, because
Yep, I feel that's
so
reasonable.
basically, I move due to the absence of practical difficulties that we decline this application.
I would second that.
We've got a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Neva?
Is this adopting the findings that were in the staff report as well?
We go back and look.
Findings started on page 21.
Yeah, it's just it's numbering different when you're
Different
on
on there.
electronic, yeah.
Yeah, that would be 15 electronically.
17.
I am comfortable, but it's not my motion, so.
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick through it.
That's-
I've read this 3 or 4 times now. Yeah, so amend my motion for a recommended observation and agreement with staff findings that this application be declined in view of there's no practical difficulty finding that we have available to us.
Courtney, do you?
I do second that.
Denied.
Denied.
Make
It's
the
denied.
motion clear that's denied.
Okay.
We're clear?
Yeah, substitute the word declined with denied.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of
The denial.
the denial motion? Signify by
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none?
I appreciate your time and deliberation. I think it was very fair.
Yeah, I encourage you to work with the staff and come on back, or you may not even have to.
We'll try to work it in.
Okay.
I appreciate your time. It was very fair.
Don't forget your siding. Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. Okay, so now I have a question. So deny or decline, deny. Why do we have to state that